Good evening. I just wanted to use a YouTube video to kind of show, or to kind of introduce myself and show a little bit more of a visual for the rest of the class for PADM 404 here at Penn State's World Campus. What I want to do is kind of show what right looks like. A lot of questions on the graphic for the Week 5 or Lesson 5 plan on the Homeland Security Grant Program, and I want to show again what I thought was a good graphic here, so you guys had a pretty good example. I also want to explain the expectations going forward, which I will do so in a little bit, especially with the term paper, which is coming up in the next couple of weeks. And I just want to do that because the term paper is going to be a far, far different animal than the talking points or the executive summaries you guys have been doing so far. Then I want to just bring this up, the FEMA course completion. I just want to ask, and I'll send out an email if there's been problems with that. Has there been problems trying to get the course completion certificates? Some people have had it, other people have not had problems, and I'm not 100% sure what the issue is. And then what I also want to talk about is current events, and I'll go ahead and talk about that now. And that's something we don't get to do in this class, and it's a shame because everything you see in the news has a Homeland Defense, counterterrorism aspect to it that I think is very relevant. So I want to start off now with current events. At first, obviously the big thing, there was an election in the past week, and I don't think the polls have finalized on what was the big issue, but certainly issues of terrorism and Ebola had a impact, or at least were used to curry favor with voters, scare voters, maybe rightfully show some problems with our government. And that probably shows you how important the kind of line of work we've done, and how, more importantly, how it affects the political process. Fair or not, right or wrong, these issues become politically relevant. So that's something to just keep in mind as we move forward. However, because there was an election, I think the big story of the past week was missed, or was poorly covered. And for those of you who don't know, what appears to be Russia tried to focus some cyber attacks against our critical infrastructure. This includes power stations, oil pipelines, fuel storage areas, things that we need to operate day to day. And I just thought it was a fascinating story that did not get the coverage it deserved. And the design was that the Russians would implant this, or they had already implanted malicious code, and if there was something that happened, there was a conflict with the United States, or we got involved in Russia's stopping in Ukraine or anything like that, they would have this malicious code already implanted and can be activated at a moment's notice. Fascinating, and maybe even lethal, or not enough coverage given to it, I want to just say to that. So that just kind of shows, one, the importance of our work, and two, it's not necessarily a terrorism that we're facing, but it's more those state actors, Russia, China, and their impact on and their desire to impact our critical infrastructure. I think that's the way we're going to see wars fought in the future. If the last major conflict between two superpowers was over nuclear weapons, the next is going to be cyber, but more importantly, how cyber impacts critical infrastructure, and how it can have cascading effects against our society, and how we go about our day-to-day basis. As I've said before, and I'll say it again, it's not, Boston, attack against the Boston Marathon might make a lot of news, and things that blow up might make a lot of news, but it's what impacts our day-to-day lives. Power, or financial sector, electricity, gas, oil. Those are the things that we depend on. We assume our lights are going to go on, but when those stop happening, those cause cascading effects throughout our society. So that's again, current events, something to think about as you proceed in the rest of the course and you proceed through the rest of this, your master's degree. You have to excuse me. There we go. So I want to also just cover the Homeland Security Grant Program. Excuse me, that should be HSGP. I apologize for that spelling error there. And I think these two graphics, again, provided by your students, by your fellow students, are what right looks like. I just want to give a heads up, and I wrote this on a lot of your topics. If you're going to do 100%, whether it's a graphic that involves 100%, whether it's money, whether it's people, whether it's voting patterns, a pie chart is usually the best way to go. Bar graphs you use when you're explaining things over a time, over a linear period. But if you're using particularly money and you're doing it out of 100% of funding, a bar graph is what you want to use. I thought this was a good one because he labeled, again, you get 1 minute or less than that. You get about 10 seconds to make an impression, and this graphic does. And if you're trying to show the percent of congressionally mandated funding for HSGP, for Homeland Security Grant Program, you've conveyed your message in less than 2 seconds here. And then the rest you can see with the axes labeled and the money labeled as well. And it's a good graphic here that's speaks pretty well to the the underlying purpose of the statement, or the underlying purpose of the assignment. This lower graphic here is pretty good too, and I really like it because it shows, it breaks out the part that has variable income. So you have the vulnerability and consequence. This is the part that kind of varies, and then of this part, it breaks it out into these sectors. I would have, or it breaks out this 48% into these sectors. One thing I would probably just say is I would have added this part, the threat part, to that graphic, because that could vary sometimes as well. And then this part obviously does not vary. This is by law designated. We're going to allocate, and this is congressional pork. Is probably the best way to put it here. So this is another way to show it, and I thought these were two excellent graphics. And this I just again wanted to show what right looked like for that paper. So finally, the term paper. Again, I'm going to be, this paper is going to be a lot different than your previous executive summaries, talking points, overviews. And the first thing I'm going to say, and I've mentioned this in your previous papers, is I want analysis. I do not want, please do not give me a cutout of the Homeland Security Grant Program. Do not just tell me this is a review of what you saw in the lessons, or this is a review of what you saw in the executive orders or in the congressional mandates. Please don't just rehash that. I want your analysis set in the paper. What are the problems? What are the opportunities? What are your recommendations? Please give me your analysis. That's the most important thing. Topic choice. I want you to choose a topic. I want you to be specific, especially if you're saying this is what's negative. I don't want 15 things that are wrong with the HSGP. I want you to choose 1 to 2 things. I want you to choose 1 to 2 opportunities that you have that you think is not being covered. I do not want laundry lists. Going with that, focus your paper. Do not give me a whole lot of history. Don't give me background. Again, I'd rather you focus on 2 to 3 aspects of the HSGP and the problems with it, and focus down on that, as opposed to giving me a history, giving me all this background. Get right to your point of your paper. And then finally, argue your point and counterpoint. Every paragraph, even every sentence, should introduce new evidence that backs up your thesis. Make sure that's argued. In addition, anticipate what other people are going to say to break up your paper. If you say the Homeland Security Grant Program is being well incorporated and well funded, and it accurately depicts our national security priorities, anticipate someone's going to say, okay, why do we spend millions of dollars on the pig poking fair in Kentucky? And I think that's just an example I'm using. I hope I didn't offend anyone from Kentucky there, but that's one of the examples that we might misappropriate spending. Why do we spend millions, hundreds of millions of dollars? And you saw it in Ferguson, Missouri, on MRAPs for local police units that probably don't need them. So anticipate those arguments if you bring up your paper in this way. So with that being said, I hope you get something from this YouTube lecture, and I would also ask that you email me and just say if you thought this was good or bad, or there's any improvements that you need in these overview YouTube points that I intend to bring up in the future.